Good day, beautiful people. Welcome to another amazing week. Wow, we almost at the end of the first quarter of 2018. I hope it's been well for you. So, for those of you who follow me on my social media pages, I said that this week's post and podcast would be revolving around race. Now, yes, race is an incredibly contentious but incredibly important issue and topic that we should all be discussing. We can't be moving away from it. And this is something that's very, very close to me, and I suppose close to a lot of other South Africans who grew up in my era. We grew up during the apartheid times. I had a very unconventional upbringing. My mother was a domestic worker, my father was a petrol attendant, and I was brought up by my mother's employees who were very generous enough and took it upon them to raise me and educate me, which was a great opportunity because my parents wouldn't have afforded the type of education that I received. But also, it was also a great sacrifice, not only on my biological parents' side, but also on my foster parents' side. So from my biological side, I didn't grow up knowing and understanding my tradition, culture, language, which is a very, very important and integral part of upbringing for anybody. And I've only realized that much later in life. And then the sacrifice from my foster parents is that the risk of raising a black child in a white home during the apartheid era was also frowned upon, but also was a major security issue. And so growing up, of course, I had many identity crises, which I thought I dealt with. I was in denial in my 20s and then started to face it in my 30s. And then really, the universe or Hashem or whoever you believe in, when it's time for you to really face your reality, you literally, excuse the pun, but like smacked against the wall and you're forced to deal with that, with that crisis in your life, that crisis in your mind. And I'm not going to go too much into that because my book is finally going to be out. In fact, I received my copies today, so it will be in bookstores in the next few weeks, and it will be online in the next 2 weeks. And of course, I will send you the links to that, and you can read up about it. But today, I wanted to focus on the attention of how people deal with racism when it's faced to you in reality. And the idea and the notion came from a very disappointing event that happened a few weeks ago. I attended a lecture at a place where I consider a safe environment for me. And the lecture was supposed to be on African identity, and I'm not going to go too much into the lecture because I don't think she deserves a lot of attention. And this post isn't about bashing her or whatever, because as I said, she doesn't need the airtime. But the premise behind the lecture was supposed to be African identity in relation to Judaism. Unfortunately, she seemed to relay incorrect information on African traditions, on cultures, and it came across in a very patronizing, and it was in fact incredibly racist. And in the room, I would say there were about 80% white people and about 20-25% were non-white. And as she expressed certain opinions and points of view, of course, some of us raised our hands and questioned that and asked where she was getting from and informed her that she was incorrect. And the more myself and a few other non-white people did, there were one or two other white people who also shared their views and shared their opinions. And what for me was the most deafening sound, for want of a better word, was the lack or the non-response of the so-called liberals in the room. Now, everyone is entitled to feel or think or say what they want. And, I always used to say, growing up, I always would rather be in a room with a right-wing Afrikaans person than with a two-sided liberalist, because at least you know where you stand with the right wing. They say you're a black person, use the K word, whatever, you know where you stand. But for me, the danger lies in somebody who, when in an environment and and racist opinions are put across, certain people will remain quiet. But then behind closed doors, when they need to gain brownie points, excuse the pun, then they express their liberal point of views. And for me, this was very, very evident in this episode. And after the talk, growing older, I've learned to deal with what comes out of my mouth, because when I get very angry or very upset, I do have the tendency to say the wrong thing. And in this case, my blood was boiling so much, and my heart was literally pulsating and was hitting the top of my palate, not even my tongue. And so I left, because I thought, if I'm going to say anything, I'm going to say the wrong thing. And it took me a couple of days to mull over it, and I was fine. And I sent an email to the organisers expressing my discontent and my disgust in what had happened. And of course, there was an apology and so forth. But what even angered me afterwards was what came with the apology, and that the neutralists in the group, or the liberalists, if you want to call them, agreed with my sentiments and realized that they should have stood up. They should have said something. And so that's why I wanted to discuss within this vlog and within this podcast, is that we're at the point in our lives and in society, everywhere there is some level of discrimination or racism. Look at what's happening in America. Black Lives Matter. What's happening in South Africa. The fact of for so many centuries we've been colonized, and we're going through this process of decolonizing our mind. And I don't even think I'm halfway through, because of the way I've been brought up and what's been ingrained in me, and me learning to really relearn and understand the power and the beauty of being black. The power, beauty, and magic that lies in being a black woman. But that's another conversation for another day. But today, it's about addressing those issues and those people that, yes, if you want to remain neutral, by all means, as I said, we're all entitled to, but then remain neutral on all levels. If you want to be a liberalist, then we need to hear your voice when the time is right, not in an email or behind closed doors. I don't have to say this to the right wingers, because we know where they stand. And people don't want to talk about race, and they're like, you get the sentiments that comes up. You're so sick and tired of hearing about racism and so forth. And to those people who are constantly saying that, well, imagine experiencing it every single day of your life, and you're just sick and tired of hearing about it. So understanding where our voices are coming from, and we're not overreacting, we're not hysterical, we're not victims or claiming to be victims. We're addressing incredibly crucial and valid topics and valid points, and we have every right to, because for so many centuries we didn't have this platform. So moving forward, and I do believe that everybody can live together. And yes, it sounds like I'm following the whole Rainbow Nation issue, but the thing is, you need to understand and acknowledge the history. And I'm not just talking about the history that ended in 1994 when South Africa suddenly became a democracy. We're talking about centuries and centuries that go back of colonizing of our country, and that of course led to the colonizing of our minds, and how we've had to integrate into another society, and now we finally claiming our space and claiming our rightful territories and so forth. And so there's that level of acknowledgement. Another very contentious issue is white privilege, and you need to acknowledge that is absolutely prevalent in our society. And more importantly, we need to hear the voices from every circle. So yes, if you're a racist, cool, then say so and live by that. Go live in a country where it will just be your race, or live in societies that it will just be that. Then we know. If you're a liberalist, then be so. Then speak up when the time is right. Because sitting behind your computer or sitting behind your desk and pretending to be one, but when that voice needs to be heard, and that voice needs to be a collective one, we need to hear it. So I'd love to hear your comments on this. Your suggestions and way forwards. If you want to share your stories, it's also, we also have our right to share our stories. And a lot of my stories on dealing with racism and dealing with myself, of course, are laid out in my book, Reclaiming the Soil. But as a society moving forward, let's be candid. Let's be honest about how we feel. Let's be, if you're gonna be taking a certain stance in life, then carry that all the way through. So that's it's very short today, but I think I was to the point about what I wanted to say. And let's go and keep this conversation going. And please, this is not a platform to race bash. It's not a platform to spew horrible comments about other races, cultures, or creeds, because it's not about that. It's about discussing our issues and acknowledging that we have the right to do so, and finding out solutions as a way forward. So I'm on this platform on YouTube. Of course, I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and it's all under Rosie Motene. If you don't want to go on the platform, then just send me a message on my website, www.rosiemotene.biz. Have a wonderful day, and we'll chat next week. I'm not sure where I want to go next week. I think I'm going to be talking a little bit more in depth about my book and where it can be found. And thank you so much for listening, and thank you for the support.